G'day everyone. Welcome to another Sunday Toolbox Tech Talk with me, Glenn Morris, from the Smart Energy Lab. Today, it's my great pleasure to have my friend along, who I'll introduce in a second, and he's just standing by in his little off-grid home. So my guest today on Toolbox Tech Talk is a self-confessed energy efficiency nerd. Now I checked, he didn't mind me calling him a nerd because he is a bit nerdy, who has worked in energy awareness and behavior change, like helping people understand how to make energy saving choices through their behavior as well as their appliances. And he's also an energy efficiency and appliance salesperson and has worked as a trainer and auditor in energy efficiency. He has lived off-grid with his partner and two kids for over 18 years. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my very good friend, Ian Moxon from What's Going Down. G'day, Ian.
G'day, Glenn. How are you going?
Good, good.
Good to catch you on Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you.
You get anything special?
Well, yeah. So what's been happening is the kids woke up about an hour after me, so they missed out on making breakfast for me. But my little one came in, who's 6, with his Milo, with his sword made out of Lego, and I said, "Oh, that's lovely, Milo. What can I do with it?" And he says, "Dad, it can draw electricity from the air." He knows that I'm into electricity, so yeah, that was kind of fun. How about you? What happened to your Father's Day?
I got a packet of hankies.
Now, you mean 3 mice?
5 mice. Actually.
5 mice. All right. That's a little in-joke, because Ian actually, his other special power is making mice out of handkerchiefs and eating chocolate.
Eating chocolate? Yeah, a couple of those kind of, perfect Father's Day. Love it. Absolutely love it. And I've got a Father's Day joke just to sort of round us off to get started. It's really noticing, we haven't seen each other for a little while up close, but Glenn, you've got a fair bit of facial hair going on. And it just sort of struck me, I used to hate facial hair, but as I've gotten older, it just seems to grow on me. Sorry. It's a dad joke. I'm allowed today, aren't I?
That's a terrible dad joke, but that is Father's Day and all dad jokes are forgiven.
Thanks. Cool.
So, just tell me. Let's talk a bit about you now. So, look, I'm billing you as the energy efficiency nerd, but how did you get interested in energy efficiency?
Good question. Yeah, look, I went travelling when I was young, in the 90s. Went backpacking around Australia, went backpacking overseas, and came back to Australia, sort of going, "Wow, this planet's a mess." Finished up my degree, went off to Sydney to work, and I ended up working for Greenpeace for a while. And I did a lot of time door knocking for Greenpeace, and it becomes a little bit disheartening as you learn more and more about the environment. The various program managers there are sort of sharing stuff with people. I kind of kept getting the same feedback for people, which was like, "Mate, when you've got a mortgage and kids, then you can start coming around to my house and telling me how to live." So I kind of just thought, really, after a while, the best thing I can do is to really put my energy into building something that I can say, well, I've made that effort, I've stepped over that mark. And so my partner and I was working as a technician at the Opera House way back then. My partner and I bought a vacant block of land out in the bush on the outskirts of Sydney, basically just behind the Wollamai National Park in a place called Weenie Creek. And it was a vacant piece of land, and we gradually built ourselves a sustainable house. It's a mud brick house. You can probably see bits of it in the background here. The journey was to, we actually chose a block of land that was going to be off grid, because the idea was to try and demonstrate that you can live well and be off grid and to have a fairly small environmental footprint. So that's kind of been the push. And it's taken a long time, and I'm not a builder, so it's all a bit imperfect. Yeah, it's been a great success, really, over time. And we've opened a House for Sustainable House Day. People came and did tours, and they just kept asking the same questions over and over. And I thought, there's a dozen really sort of simple questions. And once you sort of jump through these hoops of becoming off-grid and learning the energy management of that process, it was pretty easy to relate that to people. I could sort of walk them around the house and show them things. But eventually I kind of said, there's a business in this. People need to know this information. I stepped in between seasons at the Opera House, and I decided to go out on my own as a sole trader as a contractor and go and find work in energy efficiency. And that was about the time that John Howard's government, with Malcolm Turnbull as the environmental minister, started an energy efficiency sort of program called Solar Cities. And I got work back then, and I've kind of been working, indirectly or directly in energy efficiency since then. Yeah, so that's about 12 or more years doing that work.
Now, I've got a few pictures of your house, actually. Since you were talking about moving off grid, I was going to bring that one up so people can see. So I'm just showing a picture of your house with one of your kids and
Okay.
in the front there.
Is there a rainbow in that? Is that the picture with a rainbow?
Beautiful picture with a rainbow. So Ian can't actually see the live. He's just coming in via another means. And so I'm having to explain what you guys are seeing out there. So that's your mud brick house. I noticed it's got some solar panels on the roof. How did that happen?
Yeah. How did that happen? Well, going off grid. Initially, when the property that I live in is, you drive through about 800 meters of national park along a sort of fire trail to get to the house. And I thought, well, I'll go through the exercise of sort of costing out what it would cost power wise to run power there. I'm pretty sure it's going to work out cheaper if I just have this standalone system, if I can afford it. Spoke to the local energy authority, and they said it was $50,000 a kilometre for poles and wires, and then you had to pay another 19 to 20 something thousand dollars for a transformer at the end. So single phase power was going to be around the $120,000 mark, and three phase was going to be around $150,000 to bring power into the property. But fortunately, my partner and I were sort of thinking, now we've got to get our heads around this sort of solar power and how that works. And there was a lot of people doing it 17 years ago. There was a couple of organisations, and we got a few quotes, and they were just like, I can't make head or tail of this. And even as a technician, I kind of still didn't understand all the talk, the varying types of energy and power, and people were trying to sell us wind turbines and solar power. Unfortunately, one day I went down for a swim at the river, and this fella sort of popped out of the water. He says, "G'day," and I went, "Oh, g'day." And he said, I'm Glenn. I know quite a bit about solar. I understand you think about going off grid. And I went, "Oh, really? We need to have a conversation." And so that's kind of what happened. I fell on my feet and met an expert named Glenn Morris. And so Glenn held my hand, which is really lovely. And he carried me through the process of sort of speccing out a solar power system. And we went ahead and designed what was a really big system back then, a 2 kilowatt system with a large battery bank. And I'm happy to say we did the design well, because here we are 17 years later, and 99% of the gear is still there doing its job, and I love it. So,
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, I well remember you approached me, and that was pretty early in my career too, so 20-something years ago. And I thought you were pretty adventurous. You were spending a lot of money up front on your system. People often back then would scrimp. They'd try and get some secondhand batteries from an old telco site, and they'd get a couple of panels and just cobble something together, and suddenly imagine they could go off grid. And here was this guy turning up, was saying, "Look, this is our budget. We're going to allow quite a significant amount." I can't remember. Can you remember the numbers?
About 30,000. I said, I kind of, from the quotes we got, and they were, wow, they varied from like 20 to just under 20 to just over 40. I went, I'm going to just try and keep 30,000 aside for this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, wow, someone's really realistic about this, that off-grid isn't actually cheap. But what you were investing in is the next 17 years of electricity.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so when you think about it, $30,000 is about $2,000 a year on electricity cost. And even then, the panels are still working fine.
Yeah, so I did the calcs. Like a couple of years ago, I found my old electricity bills from the last place I lived in. And I remember doing the calculations when we sort of came to the end of the process, that it was going to take 19 and a half years to pay off the system that I was buying. And when I used to do like tours for Sustainable House Day, people would say, it was fantastic, because you get the really interested party, and then you get the sort of hanger-oner who's being dragged along to the event. And the interested party's kind of leaning in and listening, and the hanger-oner's kind of got their arms folded and leaning back. And they'd say, "How much did you say you spent on that power system, mate?" So $30,000 was a big outlay. We got about $5,000 back from the New South Wales government and about $2,500 back from the federal government. So 22.5 out of our pocket. But I worked out 19 and a half years, I would be, electricity would be coming for free. So if I sort of pictured myself 19 and 3/4 years from now, I'll be doing like a Toyota leap in the air. Yay, this quarter was free. But there's a ball and chain in that system, which is batteries. And I thought, okay, well, I'm really going to try and look after those batteries and a long life out of them. And what I can say happily is a few months ago, I dug out my old electricity bills. Electricity used to be 10.1 cents. That's what I was paying for it the year that we put solar power on. And of course, electricity has tripled in that time. In this area, people are paying around the 30-cent mark for electricity by the time you roll the GST into it. So I think my payback period hasn't reduced by a third. Hasn't come down to one third of its price because of that interest. I'm guessing around about 9 or 10 years that we sort of probably crossed the threshold of getting free electricity. And part of the conversation I used to have with those people who'd come for Sustainable House Day and they'd mock me. They go, "How much did you say you spent?" I go, "Well, if you think about it, the average person's maybe spending $500 a quarter. That's 4 times a year is $2,000. 15 years. Some people buy boats or go on skiing trips to Europe, or this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to try and make a bit of a place that I could showcase was other people would come and see and go, you know what, you can live comfortably off grid. You can live off batteries and solar. And as you know, Glenn, this is such a small system compared to what people are putting on today. But yeah, it's been a success, total success.
So Ian, actually, I've just brought up a picture of your batteries, the one that you sent me. So it's
yeah, they need a bit of work. They've been in the weather for a long time, and I should have really treated them better. But yeah, the batteries. So that's the original picture. It's probably showing 2 rows of batteries, 12 batteries there. So those were those are big old lead acid batteries that are designed. They're deep cycle batteries, and the idea there is that you don't run them down to zero. Modern chemistries give you a lot more flexibility, and everyone who's listened to Glenn's Tech Toolbox talks will know. But yeah, so the lead acid, so the idea of the design is to try and just pull 20 or 30% of the energy out each day, no more than that. So you keep them in good order. And those batteries were made here in Sydney. They sort of built in, I think they're around Liverpool. That company was. And they're 1100 amp hour, 22 volt cells. There's 12 of them, so it's a 24 volt system. And I'm really proud to say the first one failed last year. So we got 16 years out of that system. And I've begun a bit of it's like a bit of a domino effect. So the first one failed, and while I was trying to hobble together a spare, another one failed, and you go, oh, this is a domino. Next week it's going to be all of them. But so I've gone through a bit of a transition where I've had to replace 3 batteries, and I'm now chasing my tail. So the next one that goes, I'll be committing to a new system, I think.
Just coming back to going off grid and the cost structure, like you said, you spent $30,000, and I said that was an awful lot back then, and it was a lot for most people chose to scrimp a lot. Did you get a quote to connect to the grid?
Yeah. So that was like around the sort of $120,000 to bring the single phase in, and it would also have meant, just because of our location, you've got to then get an agreement to be able to bring a power cable through the national park. And the conversations that I had in national parks, I didn't follow it up formally because it was way out of my affordability range, but they were talking about needing 600 mil trenches, and it had to all be engineered and go into conduits and pits. And so it was a really big deal to even just bring the power in from the street. But we're a couple of kilometres from the nearest power line. And so that's also an issue. There was the expense of that. The way infrastructure worked back then is if I did get it and anyone joined on that was between me and the last point, then I would get money back. But it was still going to be a massive outlay, way too much,
So actually I brought up on screen a picture of your driveway after a bushfire in summer, which gives a sense of the area. So how remote from Sydney are you?
Yeah, so we're about sort of in a straight line, sort of 70 kilometres to the northwest. And so when you sort of think about, people often say, oh, you're in the Blue Mountains. Well, not really. We're in the north western corner, the Hawkesbury district. And it's where the Wallamai National Park just comes down and almost comes into the Sydney Basin. It does come into the Sydney Basin as a geographical space. And so the main road that runs through here is Putty Road, and we live on that Putty Road. It takes you out to the Hunter Valley via the Colo River and the massive Wallamai Wilderness, and that beautiful stretch had one of the biggest fires that Australia's seen in recorded history. And so that really smacked. Gosper's Mountain Fire smashed through, and it was burning It's one of the precarious things about living in the bush, like we do. It was burning for a couple of months before it really, got problematic for everybody else. But for us, on the horizon, we saw this smoke, and we know that's in a really remote spot. This could get ugly, and it did eventually. Yeah. So the Gospers fire really nuked parts of the beautiful Wollamai National Park, and the methods that RFS had to use to try and contain that were really significant. There's a bit of a squeaky door back there. Sorry about that. The methods that had to be employed were really significant because sort of from our area, from where I live beyond, it starts to very quickly turn into more dense and really high asset sort of living. There's a lot of people with large properties around here, and so they really needed to arrest the fire if they could. Multiple times it kept coming and kept jumping containment lines and kept coming. And I thought a couple of times last summer we were gone. It got to within just a few kilometres. So yeah, it was pretty hairy.
So I guess what I was getting at, sorry to interrupt you there, was that oops, I got the wrong picture. There we go. Was that you're not exactly in Whoop Whoop. You're on the fringe of grid, and there are homes within a few kilometres of you which are grid connected. But the quote was like $120,000 to bring. Right. And of course that's not really the cost of electricity. That's the cost of the luxury of being able to pay an electricity bill for the rest of your life. So with bills of what's a typical bill in Sydney these days?
Oh, like if someone's not very frugal, or if they're fairly generous use, it can be as much as people are paying $2,000. But I would say, the 800, a quarter, 800. Yeah, so that's the sort of higher end of it. But I mean, typically people who are a little frugal and a bit careful, they're probably paying around the sort of $600 to $800 a quarter, and so that's still several $1,000s a year. So over 10 years, they're paying more than I eventually paid.
So coming back to the sums, you paid $30,000 for electricity for the next 17 years versus $120,000 for the connection, probably because you're so energy efficient, probably only about $4,000 a year in electricity bills for 17 years. So that's $67,000. So plus the 120, that's up $187,000 after 17 years you would have spent. Instead of it, you spent 30 up front. So I guess that's the point when people say, what's the payback on an off-grid system? Well, it's really hard to say. I mean, what's the payback on a car? There is no such thing as a payback on a car. It gives you a utility, and what it's giving you is the ability to live in a beautiful place and be self-sufficient for energy, and no bills.
Well, it's a little cheeky, but it's kind of, once my partner and I stepped over that line and we spent the money and we got the power here, we were living, like initially I was just learning about it. I'd ring the Sparky and say, hey mate, my batteries are sitting on, they've dropped to 25.2. Is that all right? To go, sorry, 26.2. To go, mate, can you please go and put a load on those batteries? You're not using any power. We've been living here comfortably that whole time. It's hard to say to people. People find this a little challenging to hear, but once you've stepped over that line, you realise that really paying for electricity, being tethered to the grid, paying for electricity is a choice. You actually can live off the grid live comfortably. And that's kind of hard to say. Not everyone's got $30,000 that they can go and spend on this kind of stuff. Well, you wouldn't have to in today's world. And you put it on a double size system, be spending that kind of double what I've got. But so I find that the idea that people say, oh, what's the payback period? It's like, well, compared to your last electricity bill, well, when will you pay that electricity bill off? Won't there still be one coming after you've drawn your last breath? It's kind of awkward, but that's the case. People are going to continue to pay their electricity bills off. My system was paid off. My electricity prices were fixed 17 years ago from that moment. And I've got to say, watching the price of electricity go up, I've kind of gently gone, yay, my system's a bit cheaper now. Yay, my system's a bit cheaper now. Yeah, which is a bit hard.
Let's bring this back to energy efficiency. So we mentioned, I asked the random question, how much do people pay for electricity in Sydney? But actually it's all about their appliance use, and that's kind of where energy efficiency comes in. Now, I've got a couple of slides that you sent me. One of them's from Ausgrid, from their energy, what's it called? Something Energy at Home webpage. And so I'm going to bring that up. So you're probably familiar with this one, and it's
Yeah,
got a little
got a pie
circle.
chart.
Yeah, it's a pie chart basically.
Yeah, it was like a pie chart, a ring version of a pie chart. Yeah,
And its average household energy use, I guess this is based on Ausgrid's data in Sydney,
yeah.
and it's showing the largest section is hot water, 37%.
Yeah. So for the most part, as an energy assessor, we tend to use, the idea is you're going for the low hanging fruit. What's the easy stuff that you can do to help people? And we've seen, multiple technologies come along over the years, and it's kind of interesting because, I used to, when I set my house up, the cheapest way to make hot water was to have solar plus an instantaneous gas system as a backup, and so that's what I've done. And then over a number of years, we saw evacuated tube systems come into place, and they give you a great amount of extra heat for a little bit more expense, but a wonderful technology that's come into the market. So if I was building my house in the era of then, it would have been evacuated tube. And since then, we saw heat pump systems come into the market, heat pump hot water systems, and so there's been part of what I say is that being a bit of a nerd, I chase technology. I'm interested in those increments and those changes. And the great thing is, you can sort of give that advice to people if you've got a bit of passion about it. I do. I can say to people, well, this was great, or this is good, or that's got a good payback time. But if you're thinking about the future, or if that hot water system's getting a bit old, let's talk about what you might be coming up with in a year or two's time, or in 5 years' time. So yeah, I've been chasing that stuff the whole time I've been in this work. But we go for the low hanging fruit first. Hot water will be the first conversation I have with people when I go to their home.
So the hot water is the biggest one. The second biggest one is heating and cooling. What can be done there?
Yeah, so there's a stack of stuff. So our climate in Sydney, it's a temperate climate. It's not too bad. Victoria's got it a little cooler, and the winters are a little longer, and the Tasmania is similar, and so we've got a pretty cruisy climate. You used to be able to say to people, about 6 to 8 weeks of cold weather, 6 to 8 weeks of hot weather. And that's changed dramatically in even just the last decade that I've been doing this kind of work. And so that's why air conditioning and heating and cooling has kind of risen in cost. It's a much bigger player than it used to be. We've also seen a jump. A lot of houses, all the new developments in larger cities like outside of Melbourne and Sydney, etc. Those new developments are often small parcels of land, big houses. People go for open plan these days, and so they're now installing, three-phase large air conditioning systems. So managing your energy, the temperature in your home, is a really big player. And there's a couple of simple things. So a good, initially, like in the home that you're seeing behind me, great thing is to if you've got the choice, if you're starting from scratch, just orientating the house to collect as much winter sun as you can. That's a great thing. But, if you've already got an established building, if it's well insulated as per sort of more recent building code regulations, then you just got to try and manage that air conditioning or heating and cooling sort of loads, how you manage them. Simple things are operating the air conditioner at the appropriate temperature. So people often overheat or overcool their homes. And the rule of thumb here is 1 degree of change on the thermostat setting represents about a 10% change in price. So you come home, it's a bit of a cool night, and you go, oh, quick, let's warm up. And people ramp the air conditioner up to, give me 26 degrees. Well, when you think about it, if you're going from, say, a nice middling temperature of maybe 20 or 21, you go up 1 degree, that's 10%, 1 degree, up to 22, 23, 24. You're talking about a really big increase in the use. Now, if we were very good, you'd say, okay, I just want to spruik the house up with a bit of warmth, and I'll step back over and change it. Yeah, we're a little bit, it's comfy now. I just forgot about, that was 2 hours ago we came home. And all of a sudden, instead of spending $1.20 an hour, you're spending $2.50 an hour or more, So air conditioning settings is important. Using fans when it's hot. Turn the fan on first, air conditioner comes on second. And then once you're comfortable, turn the air conditioner back off and just leave the fans running. So it's all of that a lot of that advice is given out, and it helps people to just sort of go, if I put a little bit of attention on it, I can still stay comfy, but I can also keep those bills down.
Yeah, so it's a lot of personal choice there, like it's behavior change, as I started off.
Yeah.
It's part of what you do is helping people understand just the simple things. So I often say the most powerful tool for energy efficiency is your finger.
Turn it off.
Turn it off, turn it down.
Exactly.
Those are your most powerful tools, and what you generate are negawatts, the watts you never needed. I love those. So
energy efficiency definitely is it's like it's an if your concern, if part of your concern is the sort of carbon footprint or the sort of impact on the environment of energy use and etc. This one, energy efficiency is a no-brainer. There's a lot of waste, lots of waste in systems, and part of the sort of psychology of it is if you say to someone, you're actually losing money here, well, that's a big motivator. But if you say, oh, you could save a couple of cents here or a couple of cents there, it's not so motivating. But the reality is, it's going out of your bill. It's coming in your bill. It's going out of your pocket. Saving money. You're not losing money. That's beneficial.
So
That's the behavior part.
let's talk about the next on this pie chart, and I'm sure you've got some great stories, but it looks like lighting is the next big one. So I'm bringing that up now. So we've got
Lighting come up. I would have thought refrigeration might have rolled in somewhere around then. Often fridges are third, and that's changed a bit. Yeah, so it's changed a bit. Our fridges have become more efficient. Lighting's been a great transition. So we've gone from incandescent light bulbs. So an electric filament, punch electricity into it, and it heats up and it starts to glow. And I think when Edison first came up with it, he kind of went, "Is this a heater? Or is it a light bulb? I'm not sure." Anyway, so we've turned, they made them into light bulbs. They also made light bulbs. Initially, the sort of larger manufacturers got together and said, well, we don't want these things to last forever. Let's just make it, we'll work out a sort of system. We'll come up with an idea. So the idea was that a classic incandescent light bulb, was designed to run for about 1,000 hours, which is about approximately 3 hours a day over a year. And so then you go back and replace the light globe, which is good for the power, good for the company selling light globes, but they produce an enormous amount of heat. So you may remember from a few years ago, if you turned a light globe off and you went to reach for it, you'd pull your hand away and the tips of your skin off your fingers is still on the globe. No, not quite. But the globes were really hot, especially a large globe, massive amounts of heat. We transitioned away from that. The lighting company said, yes, we can be more efficient. What we might do is we'll pop a little halogen capsule in there. That makes it more efficient. A little bit of a greenwash. Yes, it does help. It reduces the amount of energy somewhat. They go from being, sort of 80% heat, 20% light down to about sort of 60% heat, 40% light. It's an improvement. But, what we've gotten clever is that sort of we stepped past that and we went on to compact fluorescence. And the compact fluoros, you flip the story altogether there. It's only about 20% heat. It's about 80% light as you're punching energy into them. They're a bit of a pain when you first flick them on. They'd be like, and here I am. And then they go, actually, I'm getting brighter. And gradually, you finally go, full brightness. Bit of a nuisance if you're just stepping into the bathroom for a second or, someone just needs to get something out of a pantry. And the other thing was too, a lot of people got, oh my God, I got this light. It's a new one. It's so horrible. It's like I just stepped out of the disco at the end of the night. It's like, okay, you can get different color temperatures too, which is kind of good to know. But luckily, we've really seen the new LED light globes enter the market, really reach full maturity. All the large companies are making them now, and you can get them in really every shape and size that you want. And the great thing about LED, 10% heat, about 90% light. So you're not paying for heat anymore. And it probably will be a problem for people who want to raise little chickens in a cardboard box, like a shoe box. You might not be able to get enough heat from an LED light compared to the old incandescent, which was a perfect little incubator for them. But maybe you just stack a few LEDs in there. Now, there's other...
Can I tell a story here? So, I mean, it's not about LEDs, but it's about the fact that there's heat given off by appliances, which is often way more than the service they're supposed to be providing. One of my students found his son sitting in his bedroom with two large plasma screens either side of him. So he was sort of wedged in between these two plasma screens, both of them turned on, and he wasn't even watching them. He was reading a book, and his dad said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm cold. These are keeping me warm." And so it turns out that a plasma screen actually is a room heater with a TV function. So it's mostly room heater.
Yep. So when plasmas came out, beautiful, fantastic color contrast. You got great depth in blacks and really rich reds. It was fantastic. looking image, pretty short lifespan. But yeah, as an energy assessor, like my colleagues, we used to call them colourful heaters.
Colourful.
It was like 4 or 5 times the energy use, and it was pumping out heat. Yeah, really good. So if you've got a plasma heater, TV, it might be time to consider moving on, uh, unless you need the heat in the room.
I'm bringing that slide back up again because I love it so much, Ian. And it's what's next on our list after lights is refrigeration. Now they're pretty close, 7% refrigeration, 9% lighting. So what can we do about refrigeration in terms of energy efficiency?
Yeah, so refrigeration has definitely changed. So it was one of the things, older charts, 10 or so years ago, used to put that up around 15% of energy use. And what we've seen is the fridge industry, the refrigeration industry, really step up to come along with the energy efficiency world. And so the outcome of that is fridges have become vastly more efficient. So as you may remember, Glenn, when I first started speccing this house and the power that we needed for it, we worked out we needed about 14 solar panels. And then we decided we would get a fridge rather than running on a gas fridge. And that meant adding an extra 2 panels to the system. Now, back then, panels cost me $1,000 a pop. It was an expensive proposition, but it meant that I could run an electric fridge. It would run throughout the night, and my battery system, my solar power system would be able to deliver that. That fridge lasted for 10 years, beautifully, well and good. But by the time that fridge got to the end of its life, I was able to go out to like not hardly normal, to a large chain that sells white goods and buy just an off-the-shelf 240-volt fridge that used a whole lot less power than my efficient 24-volt one back in the day. And so the whole refrigeration world has become vastly more efficient. But there's a couple of simple things you can still do with fridges. Now, first of all, we've got these regulations now where they are meant to display the energy use of them, and so they have a star system. So that's really good. I bring that to people's attention. There's a government website on that you can have a look at called energyrating.gov, I think it is, just .gov.au. And on that you can sort of search around a whole bunch of appliances, lots of different kinds of white goods, but the great thing is you can kind of go and find a really efficient model. And so before you go out to the shop, you should be aware, I've got a fridge, we're looking for something about 500 litres, it's about this tall by this tall. Hop on that website and you do your homework first so that in your mind you go, I should be able to find a fridge that's in my size in that sort of 4.5 to 5-star range. That would be ideal. But of course, when you walk in the door at the shop, they're going to say, yeah, we've got this one on special. It's the right size. It's just 2.5 stars. But look at the price. It's only $1,200 or $1,100. And you're going to go, what's it actually going to cost me over time? Well, the reality is those couple of stars less means lower upfront price over the long term, the life of the appliance, much more electricity. So you'll be spending hundreds of dollars more on electricity over the duration of the life of the appliance. And so going for the low star cheap option on the day is not a good decision, but aiming for the high star one. And they may or may not have the model that you wanted. Often if you ask, they'll get them in for you. So yeah, we bought a really efficient fridge second time around, and it's just fantastic. It's actually got a sort of dual compression system too. It's really great.
Speaking of stars, though, people who might have bought a fridge 15 years ago, it might have been a 5-star fridge. But when you looked at the kilowatt hour number, which is inside that star rating label, the kilowatt hours is actually the energy used, right? You might buy a fridge today and it might use the same amount of energy in kilowatt hours, but it's only got 3 stars. Why is that?
Yeah, the star system changed. So they keep going back and revisiting sort of how these things are measured. And so, over time we've seen a couple of changes. Yeah, so older fridges, the rating's slightly different to modern fridges. Yeah, and I mean, they will change again in the years to come as we sort of, these things are being reviewed semi-regularly and they're improving regularly, which is great. But yeah, I really encourage people to try and buy the high efficiency device for that long-term purpose. And when you sort of step back, if you're buying electricity off the grid, the amount of the original resource of the energy, and if it's coming lost as heat earlier on in the process. You take a lump of coal and you throw it into a furnace and off comes heat. We then put it through a series of cycles to deliver it into a householder's electricity. And each time it's passed the turbine to make electricity on a generator, and then finally some transmission and transformers up and down. About 80% of the energy off that coal has already evaporated before it arrived out of your power point. So if you can pare back a little bit at home, that upstream has had an enormous impact. So it's very worthwhile chasing that down. And if it's a matter of, when you're sort of looking at the lifespan of a product like that, if we're only talking about, chicken feed really between the cheap appliance and the high electricity price as opposed to at the much lower electricity price, it's worth tipping the balance towards the efficient one because it's better for the environment by a long shot.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
So Ian, just having a little technical problems at my end here, but you're doing a great job of filling in while talking while I click on a few buttons there. I've just actually brought up the energy rating website just so people could understand it. So I'm just going to bring that on screen now. And what would you use this site for? How would a consumer use this site?
Yeah, for the most part, there's a spot where you can click onto various icons, and once you go to those icons, it might be like refrigeration, or it might be washing machines and dishwashers. I tend to go to those, and then once you go to that part of the site, there's a good descriptor on the front page that tells you about the way that the star rating system, the energy labeling has been put into place, and that's useful. But if you don't really want to fuss with that, you just want to get the product before you go out shopping on Saturday, Sunday, or when lockdown's over, or if you're doing it online, then you go and find the individual thing. Air conditioners are in there too, so that's really good. Go into that area. There's often a little sort of sorting sort of process where you can go, I'm looking for a system that's, say, this big. So it might give you a kilowatt range, or it might give you a size range. So I can shake down a search, and the search will let me find the appliance that suits my needs. And then you go, okay, go and find me the most efficient one. You kind of set the parameters and then go and find me the most efficient. And it will then give you a listing of all of the appliances in your criteria, starting with the most efficient one at the top.
So while you're talking, I've actually brought up that slide. It's got a picture of all the products as icons. And so, for instance, if we went to a refrigerator, and it gives you refrigeration commercial, refrigeration domestic.
Yeah.
So
and then you get an opportunity to sort of hunt further down in there by setting up. It's a bit like when you're using something like eBay or something. You sort of, what's your criteria? Where's your search criteria? How much you're spending or whatever. It asks things like about the size of the appliance, and the energy use becomes part of the criteria you can search on. You've got any of that on the screen at the minute?
Yes. So I've actually just scrolling through the information page. It's searchable too. So you can go to the search field and search for appliances by size range, configuration options. It's really pretty clever.
And you can choose if you've got a particular love or a family member that works for A, B, or C company. You can say, no, I really just like the Bosch, or I really just like the LG, or I really just like the whoever it might be. If you want to, you can particularly search down appliance, brand names. But the likelihood is that when you get to that list, you're looking at the sort of energy efficiency as the main criteria. Often the first couple of items can be, they're the sort of industry leaders, the trailblazing new technology that's out there. And it's fantastic, it's incredibly efficient, but often that comes at a slightly higher price tag. So my advice is, somewhere in that sort of top 5 or top 10, that's where you want to be going, because as soon as you step back from those really crest of the wave new technology stuff, the stuff just behind it is much more affordable. You may not be getting a 5.5 star, maybe you're getting a 5-star, or maybe not getting a 5 or a 4.5 star, but cost-wise it goes from being $2,500 to $1.5. It's like, oh, great. So just stepping off the crest of the wave is my advice if you're trying to be frugal. But there are manufacturers around the planet that make these incredibly efficient stuff. Fridges that come from the Scandinavian countries, and amazing technology, but some of it has a high price tag.
Just coming back to your batteries, we're jumping around a little bit here, but to keep it fresh, and welcome for those who've just joined us on this live Facebook Live Toolbox Tech Talk with Ian Moxon and myself, Glenn Morris. So I'm just going to bring up that picture of your battery room again. So one of the questions I get a lot from people is, how sustainable is a lead acid battery, or how sustainable is a lithium ion battery? And what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, so being a nerdy kind of person with an interest in tech, it's certainly one of the things that I've had to field over the years when people have asked, Well, I don't know about having a big whole whole lot of lead and a whole lot of acid at my place. Yeah, okay. The thing about lead is that in this process, the lead gradually starts to lose its form a little. And if you've ever seen a really old lead acid battery, it kind of flakes and falls apart. The acid is corrosive and it will destroy it. And so the process of charging and discharging the plates means you get they decay. But lead still fetches a pretty high price for recyclers, and so lead can be recycled. The acid, it needs to be managed. If you've got uses for acid, that would be great. Would I suggest everybody go out and get a lead acid battery? Yeah, that's a lot of toxic stuff around. We get lead naturally, of course. Lead, can be, they dig it up, they find it in all sorts of resources around the planet. And lead is used and has been used traditionally for various purposes. Like, we used to use it on our roofs for flashing. There's still a bit of lead stuff in the building industry. We know that it's not good for us to ingest it. That's bad news. Unfortunately, the sort of negatives may be that lead entering the atmosphere and the environment probably is toxic for all sorts of living creatures. So that's not so good. So the thing I like about lead acid in the day, it was a tried and true technology, and I can say that it's lasted really well for us. I'm really happy about it. The cost of the materials up front is paid for just over a few years. And so I think that the lifetime cycle, if it can, if we get into a good and complex recycle system, then I think it's okay. What I'm looking forward to is seeing the newer technologies come along, which will steer us further away from those sort of more toxic materials. You've got a visitor there, Glenn. So materials like lithium are great. There's a limited supply of lithium, so there's probably not enough for everybody on the planet. There's probably not enough for everybody on the planet to have big lithium battery banks in their homes and in their cars. Lithium is a limited resource that's available to us, but its energy density is really good. So it's light and high energy density. So I think it's perfect for transport. And while we're sort of getting the world going down the sort of lithium path, stationary energy lithium banks are really, the more that go out there, the economies of scale come down. The mining of the material and the resources mean that the material becomes more affordable. That economies of scale will make it cheaper for everybody. I expect lithium is probably going to be around for a decade or two, perhaps, and then we'll probably move on to other technologies. And I was really excited about things like saltwater batteries, but the large players that have come out, there's still they're still working on making that technology good, because salt water is such a big and common resource. So maybe recycled plastic containers and salt water would be great in the long term.
Can I interrupt you, Ian?
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me know that my old 6-year-old was sneaking in behind me. The joys of doing everything from home these days. He wanted his special sword that brings electricity from the air back probably for a recharge or something. But coming back to the lead acid battery, just a point I wanted to make, which I think is quite interesting, is that lead acid batteries apparently is probably the most recycled product by weight on the planet. Now, lead is a toxic material, and certainly you don't want it to enter the environment. But when it gets recycled, 99.9% of a lead acid battery is made into another lead acid battery. And the fact that the end of life of a lead acid battery is a positive cost, you actually get money for it. So, that pile of lead that you've got that's just about had it is probably worth $1,000. There's a fair whack of money sitting there, and it's very easy to recycle. But you're right. I think we've moved on. Personally, I think we've moved on from lead. We are seeing that it's really a legacy energy storage system now being used in automotive applications, etc. But that's probably just because cars have always used lead acid batteries. But last week on Toolbox Tech Talk, I had Bradley Patton and Craig Hunter from Power Plus Energy, and they were talking about their lithium batteries. But they're actually technology agnostic. I mean, if there is a better technology coming along, they're basically in the energy storage business, not necessarily the lithium business. So, I agree with you that lithium's probably got a life, and it may be not that long, but it is going to be a big mover for some time now. Anyway, so...
Well, and lithium's also highly recyclable too, isn't it? So there'll be a lot of recovery from the lithium systems too. I like the idea that any battery system that you have will recover. You can recover the resources out of it, and we're seeing that too in Australia. We'll catch up to the Europeans and have good recycling on our photovoltaics as well. I mean, there's a lot of resources. We know that if you pull apart a phone, and you can draw a lot of resources out of it too. There's the technology and recycling of technology is only an industry that's going to grow in the future.
Now, I've brought up a picture here, which you may remember, which is is your temperature gauge.
Aha, yeah. So that's on the outside. It's actually it's a little bit of I shouldn't have it in that spot, but it's on the western face of a wall. But that's the wall where my battery storage is. So that gets a lot of sun, and you can see that the temperature there is pretty high. We get some cracking hot weather coming in from the west in the afternoons, like everybody does. So insofar as so it's interesting you brought up Craig from Power Plus. The idea that batteries should be. I like the idea that the technology is made locally, because really we do have quite specific local conditions, and I think it's valuable that you can buy high quality, good tech that is designed for our climate, designed for our circumstances, and there are a whole bunch of climatic regions in Australia, and so I wanted my batteries to last. They're in an enclosed store there that's made of mud bricks. There's a lot of energy goes into those bricks in a summer afternoon. There's an air venting system above it so that they can breathe. But the idea is, keeping them up off the ground and treating them well. If you look after these things, they're going to last. But yeah, I think that the thermometer's there just to say, well, we do really have some extreme weather in this country, and so buying local, but buying stuff that's can accommodate our extremes, that's good. We're not going to see temperature get milder over time. It looks to me like we're, well, not looks to me. I'm pretty confident that we're on a cascade towards more and more extreme weather, and that's going to mean even hotter summers. And so even in the sort of 10 or 12 years that I was giving, I worked for an energy company locally many years ago, and they used to talk about event days, the very hot days that Western Sydney used to experience. And they said, oh, we sort of get 12 to 15 of those a year. And you go, okay, all right, okay, yeah. And so on those days, the electricity infrastructure really struggles with that sort of heat in the environment, whether it's temperatures above 38 degrees or above. You're talking about transformers struggling, your local substations are struggling, and then the actual infrastructure down the streets are struggling as well, and people's homes then. Sydney suddenly decided to really take up the call for air conditioning. A big expansion in parts of Western Sydney, and houses went in with really large air conditioning systems. And I know, one of those regions around the Bacchus of the Blacktown area, it's a big growth area in Sydney. The power company said to us that they had planned out infrastructure and allowing for growth, and before the suburb was half built, in that particular time, suddenly Sydney-siders were buying plasma TVs and big air conditioners. They had to double the infrastructure in that suburb, even though they'd planned out for growth, typical kind of growth. Halfway through the building of that suburb, they needed to double all of their infrastructure in there. So, yeah, I think we're in for significant weather, and I think trying to be buffer yourself for that means you need to be thinking not just about today's spec, but the longer term spec. Investments are not going to last a long period of time. It's worth your while planning it out.
Actually, just coming back to just the general concepts around energy efficiency, how much do you think the design of the home has an impact on your ability to reduce your energy use?
It's fantastic. Yeah, look, it's the thing that I really love. I get a bit of a buzz out of watching. People have seen things like grand designs, and they have grand designs in the UK and Australia and otherwise. I love it. People build these homes and they get in these fantastic triple glazed windows for these cold European climates and stuff. If you have the opportunity to choose the way your house is orientated and you work with your home, being efficient in the design and build of a home will be a massive saving for you long term. So I know for a fact. So when you look behind me, there's glass over here, and it's down that face. This whole what you're looking behind me it's facing north. The camera's looking to my north. I got to the real luxury of being able to get out a compass when I came onto this building site and go, okay, which way is north? I went, that way is north. So the long side of my house faces north. the eaves overhang to the right amount so that the winter sun comes in under the eaves and feeds into the house, and the summer sun is excluded because the summer sun comes, more. Just the simple things, the orientation of the house, and then the building materials used in the house. So good insulation, high thermal mass, and that means dense materials. Concrete's got a high energy footprint, but if it's infrastructure that's there for a very long time, then that can be offset. But bricks, mud bricks. Or if you're in a cold climate, it could be things like straw bale, the sort of creating density, but also then good insulation. So trapping the energy inside the home so that you can use it, or indeed excluding summer sun, so making use of that. And then intelligent things like being able to control how much energy is flowing in and out of the home via your windows, via good insulation in the roof, being smart about using fans and things. So orientation and the core building materials, I think it's enabled us to live here very comfortably. This is a warm little house in winter. But and the converse is, the other side of that is, unfortunately, my design was really set out for winter, so we also warm up a bit in summer. But I got to say, considering the last couple of summers we have, I think most people are warming up on those when you get a string of very hot days. So,
coming to heat, I notice you've got mud brick house behind you, all around you, in fact. How does that perform?
Yeah, so I'm really, really happy with the mud brick. So initially we were just going to build a shed. It's one of the stories that my partner and I continue to enjoy as a laugh years later. I was just going to start by building a shed here, and then we would design and build a house in the long term. And my partner said, "This is taking forever. Let's turn this into a house." And I really like the idea of mud bricks. I'm like, mud bricks? I don't know anything about mud bricks. So we fell on our feet. There's a local expert around here, a chap named Ray Trappel, and he really helped us to sort of look at the different considerations for the building material around the house. So there's a couple of different mud brick makers locally, which is pretty cool. One guy made a type of brick that had straw as well as clay and a little bit of cement and some glues and sawdust. He had this real great mix of materials, and so that was really good, but didn't quite suit our aesthetic. And then the other option was like a really basic, really clay-filled, very raw-looking mud brick, which is lovely and earthy looking, but really raw, and would have required a lot of treatment to manage it, rendering and things. We ended up actually doing some sample digs around the property to find how much clay we had, and we discovered we didn't have a very high content of clay. So I'm on the top of an old sandstone ridge, and there's very little soil or clay. And so in the end, we ended up buying the mud bricks, and they came from up the coast, paid for a bit of transport to get them here. But they've been absolutely amazing. We've never had a damp issue in this house. So the mud bricks seem to soak up a bit of moisture internally. We've never ever had any kind of damp issues. They regulate really well. So all those sort of all except the very hot days of the year, they just sort of help insulate the temperature from outside to inside magically. They seem to suck up warmth and then it radiates back out. So we have a little fireplace here which keeps us warm. I'm on a fairly big bush block and there's always trees down. It's kind of handy. But it's a toasty, warm little house, and those mud bricks really make a difference. And you can see behind me these doors back there. So I put lots of glass on the north side of the house. That's where kids' bedrooms are too. You want kids to play in their bedrooms? Put them on the north side of the house. If they're in the south side of the house, they'd come and bring all their toys out in the lounge room. So when you take your shoes off on a winter's evening when you walk into this home, that part of the floor there it radiates warmth. It's actually one of the warmest parts of the house, and it's directly in front of that glass because the winter sun comes in and warms up the slab.
A lot of northern glazing is part of that energy efficiency design, passive solar design of the building. So the mud brick itself does heat up, but is it because of its thickness that it can actually moderate temperature?
Yeah, so the thicker you go, the better the thermal regulation you get. So, not that you want to go out too far. Our mud bricks are only 200 mil, which they're sort of really designed for internal walls. That's sort of what they were designed for, load and structure-wise. My home stands up on posts and beams, so that's the structure that holds the roof up. But 200 mil mud bricks regulate a lot of energy, but this is where I come unstuck a bit in summer, is that eventually after a number of hours, the heat will finally transfer through the brick and then the whole brick is warmed up. And then so by the evening, if you get a sort of on one of those really long, we get 14 hours of baking hot sunlight in a summer's day. And by the time you get out, the sun going down just after 8 o'clock or around 8 o'clock, those mud bricks are then just gently just throwing that heat back off over hours and hours and hours. So our house stays a little warm in summer because of that. But if I'd gone out a little thicker to the sort of 300 mil mud brick walls, 300 mil bricks, I would have had that extra density to stop the heat making its way right through. So learning for me, and of course we've got other treatments that we're able to do. And definitely as an energy assessor, I've got to say, it's very easy to simply install some sort of electronic gadget or box to reduce your energy use. The minute you do that, the likelihood of you going back and treating your house to improve it, people tend to dismiss it and just manage their electricity bills instead. And if you can treat the home first, that's going to pay itself off much quicker than sort of having to manage the technology, the air conditioners and things. So smart planting of deciduous trees, a pergola that has sort of timber sort of louvered in a way that the winter sun can come through, but the summer sun is blocked out. Allowing for good breezes to flow through. Your home will already have breezes coming through on a particular direction from the south, likely in our area. And so we've gradually increased the size of windows on the south side of the house, and we've replaced them with louver windows, so you get a massive amount of airflow. So on those hot nights, we open the house up and it really starts to purge that heat. So so good thick density makes a difference. Where you guys are, it's a little cooler. You want more insulation, and so you might be going for like a nice thick thermally insulated home with straw bale walls, like the ones behind you.
Nice cross to me, Ian. Thank you. So I will actually be doing a little feature on my home. So I live in a slightly different climate zone. So southern Victoria at altitude of 700 meters. So it's cold. Like we had snow quite a couple of times this year. Often winter temperatures don't get much above 5 or 10 degrees. So it's all about insulation. We don't actually have that thermal lag with a diurnal variation that you get in New South Wales, so that you can actually dissipate at night time that heat is being dissipated back to the environment, but daytime it's being absorbed by the brick. So the materials themselves vary with the climate. And of course, if you're in Queensland, Ian, we'd be talking about, or Northern Territories, ventilation, wouldn't we? As a way of avoiding having to use air conditioning. But we're coming to the end of the show, and I just wanted to touch on a couple of other things, which is, one more thing actually. Yes. You learn a lot when you build a home and you live in it for a long time. If you were to do this all over again, what would you change about the design?
Okay. So first up, when we came onto this block of land, it was pretty much a raw bush block. And several times I've had machines come here and do work. So the first thing I would do is say, if you go to that kind of extreme where you're starting from scratch, get a really big machine, because they do the work very efficiently and you can get a lot done. So anyway, that's more an earth moving thing. As a builder, I'm not a builder, and so it's been a giant learning curve. And I've asked for help. And what's astounding is, don't be afraid to take on a project, because you'll find there is help out there. There's an amazing number of people who are going, I can give you some advice there. I have a few of those around here. I can, sell you cheap, or, there's people who have secondhand materials. Lots of secondhand materials in this house. That really helps. I think the orientation sort of passive design thing is really important, and I would absolutely that's been a success here, and I'm going to redo that again. But definitely, learning curve. Two things. As I'm not a builder, the big stuff goes up quick and it looks impressive, but the finishing off work takes forever and ever and ever. If you can marry into a family, or find someone who's really good at building, you want your own chippy, someone close by. Having tradespeople, this is a really valuable thing I found. You've got to mesh with those people. The instances where I've been in a bit of a hurry and someone's come out and we haven't really quite spoken the same language, I've often found I've had to go back and sort of not correct, but alter things, or the outcome hasn't been quite what I want. But the person who seems to nod, who follows your conversation, who says, so I could do this or I could do that, and you just get a sense that you're going to work with them, go with your gut feeling there. That really does help. There are so many good tradespeople out there. And so my advice is to, find someone that you're going to work with. If the cost is a little higher, but you have confidence in someone, it's a good outcome for you. So yeah, try not to cheap out on everything. I've outlaid money here a few times on things. Going off grid, was a very expensive exercise to start with, but it's undoubtedly over the long term paid for itself. And I guess what would I change here at this place? I would get slightly thicker mud bricks, but we have the opportunity of rendering them, so I'm going to do that.
Right, so it's not all over yet. You could still sort of bring your wish list onto the existing building because it's got good bones, and you've learned a lot, and there's ways of making it better.
Yeah. The only other thing I might say is, get on to your local polys and encourage them to promote, push, step forward into renewables and intelligent buildings. We've become the biggest builders on the planet. We build the biggest houses in Australia now, and they're not. Although the sort of building codes are improving, they're not necessarily all that efficient. And I think if you're a little intelligent, we don't need to live in little parcels of land with great, in a great big open plan box. I'm not saying we're going back to the 50s where everyone gets a quarter acre. But yeah, being efficient and building what you need, that counts. Talking to your polys about getting onto the right path there.
Well, Ian, we've come to the top of the hour, and it's been great chatting with you again. It's just like having a visit and a beer in the days when we were allowed to actually sit together and discuss the virtues of energy efficiency. So once again, thanks so much for your experience, your knowledge, and sharing it with everyone.
No worries. Thanks, Glenn. I love these series. This is great work you're doing. Really love it.
Cool. All right, everyone. There were a few technical glitches today, so you probably got to see quite a few little slip-ups on my behalf, but that's what happens when you do a live event. And I'll be back next week. I haven't decided who my guest will be next week, but it'll be the same time, same place, live on Facebook, 2 p.m. Melbourne time. So thank you very much. And we're out. See you, Ian. Bye.
See ya. Bye.